It was Christmas Eve, and a typical Midwestern blizzard was pounding the Chicago suburbs. I stood on the front porch of my son Wesley's house, my hand gripping a small, wrapped keepsake deep inside my coat pocket. The biting December wind turned every breath I took into thick white mist. The home sat in a wealthy subdivision, looking like something straight out of an Architectural Digest spread. Porch. The manicured shrubs were dusted with a flawless layer of snow, warm golden light poured from every window, and a lavish custom holiday wreath hung from the heavy oak front door. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, had probably ordered it from some high-end boutique. My fingers were completely numb, but I had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, trying to summon the courage to press the doorbell. Porch. I was 63 years old, yet standing before my own son, I felt like a nervous child who had done something wrong. Through the large picture window, I could see a massive Christmas tree in the living room, towering and decorated to perfection. It was nothing like the modest little trees I grew up with, or the sparse, budget pines Wesley and I used to decorate together when he was little. Porch. I caught a glimpse of Wesley moving around inside, making final preparations for Christmas dinner. Sarah was there too, wearing a brand new burgundy dress, looking just as polished and untouchable as ever. The small ornament in my pocket had cost the last $27 to my name. Porch. It was a sterling silver angel, engraved on the back with Wesley's First Christmas. 35 years ago, when he was born, I had bought the exact same one. For decades, I kept the original safe, hoping that one day we would share a normal, close relationship where I could pass it down to him as a family heirloom so he would understand what it meant. Porch. But the original was lost in a move, so I scraped together everything I had to buy this replacement. Taking a deep breath of the freezing air, I finally pressed the doorbell. A crisp, multi-tone chime echoed through the house, part of an intercom system that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Footsteps approached, and my heart began to pound against my ribs. The door swung open. Porch. There stood my son, Wesley. He was tall, handsome, and wearing an expensive cashmere sweater. But the moment his eyes landed on me, the warmth on his face instantly turned to stone. Mom. His voice was completely flat, the way someone talks to a pushy door-to-door salesman. What are you doing here? My throat tightened. I had practiced this moment 100 times in my head. Porch. I brought you a little Christmas gift. I just thought, maybe we could. We told you not to come. Sarah's voice drifted from behind him. She stepped up, placing a perfectly manicured hand on Wesley's shoulder in a quiet display of control. Wesley made it very clear that Christmas Eve dinner is strictly for immediate family. Immediate family. Those words hit me like an open-handed slap. Porch. I was the mother who gave him life and raised him. If I wasn't immediate family, who was? I just wanted to see everyone, I said, my voice shrinking into something quiet and humiliating. It's Christmas Eve, Wesley. I haven't seen you guys since Emma's birthday party. You mean since you made a scene at Emma's party? Wesley cut in without hesitation. Emma was my 6-year-old granddaughter. Porch. The so-called scene was nothing more than me quietly pleading for a single photograph with her. I didn't make a scene, I tried to explain weakly. I just wanted. You always want something, Mom. Wesley's voice turned sharper, more distant. You want attention, you want us to bend our lives around you, you want this, you want that. But you never stop to think about what we want. Porch. Every word hit like a hammer to the chest. Through the gap behind him, I could see the dining room table, set with an elegant runner and 6 sets of fine china. Wesley, Sarah's parents, who had just flown in from Florida, and my 2 grandchildren, 6 place settings. At my own son's table, there wasn't even a corner reserved for me. Porch. Growing up, you didn't even know how to take care of me, Wesley continued, making the ground feel like it was spinning beneath my feet. You were always working, always exhausted, always making excuses. Now that you're older, you want to show up and play Grandmother of the Year? That's not how the world works. Porch. I opened my mouth, desperate to tell him how, After his father passed away, I worked back-to-back double shifts just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. I wanted to remind him how I would come home running on empty and still sit up to check his homework. How every sacrifice I made was to give him the comfortable life he enjoyed today. Porch. Sarah stepped forward, cutting off any chance I had to speak. Wesley is right, Rena. You missed your chance to be a good mother. You can't just show up out of nowhere now and expect to force your way into our family. Our family, not the family. As if I were a stranger trying to break in. I looked directly at my son. When had his eyes become so cold? Porch. When had he learned to look at me like nothing more than a burden? Please, I whispered, hating how broken I sounded. I just want to spend Christmas with my family. This is my family, Wesley said, gesturing toward the warm, bright house filled with laughter. My wife, my kids, my in-laws. You made your choices a long time ago, Mom. Now I'm making mine. Porch. The silver angel in my pocket felt impossibly heavy. 35 years. For 35 years, I held on to the hope that one day my son would see how deeply I loved him. I think it's best if you leave now, Sarah said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. You're upsetting the children. Porch. From the living room, I could hear Emma and her little brother playing, their laughter blending with the soft holiday music drifting through the built-in speakers. My own grandchildren barely knew who I was, because every visit felt like a battle and every phone call was screened and monitored by Sarah. I tried one last time, tears blurring my vision. Please, I'm your mother. Porch. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes, but then Sarah gave his shoulder a subtle squeeze, and his expression wiped clean into cold indifference. No, he said quietly. You just gave birth to me. That's not the same thing as being a mother. The heavy oak door shut with a solid click, leaving me completely alone on the freezing porch. Through the glass, I watched my son walk back to his perfect holiday dinner, back to his perfect family, and back to a life that had no room for me at all. I stood in the falling snow for a long time. It came down harder, melting against my worn winter coat. The keepsake in my pocket felt like a burning weight, mocking me for ever believing things could change. Eventually, I turned around and forced my stiff legs down the driveway. My beaten-up old Honda Civic was parked at the curb. Sitting next to Wesley's BMW and Sarah's Mercedes, it looked out of place and pathetic, just like me standing outside their polished lives. I sat in the driver's seat, trying to stop crying. The heater barely worked, and my breath fogged up the windshield. I had used my last bit of gas money to drive out here, money that was supposed to go toward groceries for next week. I knew I couldn't stay parked there. In a neighborhood like this, if an old car lingers too long, watchful neighbors or the homeowners association call the police on an unfamiliar vehicle. I started the engine and drove away from Wesley's neighborhood, leaving behind a world I would never belong to. The snow picked up rapidly, and road conditions turned dangerous. The city plows hadn't reached this stretch yet, and by the time I made it back to my rundown area, a layer of black ice covered the streets. I didn't want to park outside my building because the old battery was already weak, and if temperatures dropped further, the car wouldn't start the next morning. So, I pulled over near a bus stop a few blocks from my apartment. The stop was just a weathered metal bench under a flickering streetlight, offering zero protection from the wind. I sat down heavily, feeling an ache in every bone of my 63-year-old body. Slush had soaked through the worn soles of my boots, leaving my feet freezing, and my hands were so stiff, I couldn't even feel the silver angel in my pocket anymore. That was when I noticed him. A man was standing in front of the transit schedule, frantically checking his pockets. He looked to be in his late 40s, dressed in a sharp wool coat, but right now he was completely disheveled, as if he had been running through the storm for blocks. His hair was damp with melted snow, and he kept checking his watch with growing panic. "Excuse me," he called out over the wind. "Do you know when the next bus downtown comes by?" I squinted through the snowfall at the timetable. Probably about 15 minutes. He let out a frustrated sigh and searched his pockets again. I can't find my wallet anywhere. I must have left it back at the restaurant downtown, and now I'm completely stuck. His voice trailed off, looking genuinely stranded. I should have stayed out of it. I had enough problems of my own. Porch. But seeing him stand there, completely helpless in the freezing cold, reminded me too much of how I felt inside. How much do you need? I asked, already knowing the fare. A single transit pass downtown is $5, he said before immediately shaking his head. No, I can't take money from you. I reached into my old purse and pulled out my last $5 bill. Porch. That was my little emergency fund. I worked part-time as a night cleaner at the municipal hospital, and that $5 was supposed to buy a warm hot chocolate from the vending machine during my overnight shift tomorrow. $4.50 for a warm drink to get through the cold, and the remaining 50 cents for the tip jar at the coffee cart downstairs. Porch. Take it, I said, holding out the bill. The man stared at the cash, then looked up at me. I can't take this, you don't even know me. It's Christmas Eve, I said quietly. Everyone should have a way to get home on Christmas. He took the bill, his hands trembling slightly, whether from the freezing cold or genuine relief. Thank you. How can I ever pay you back? I promise I will. Porch. If you give me your address? Don't worry about it, I said, feeling the chill sinking straight to my bones. $5 wasn't going to fix my life, but it could get him out of the cold tonight. What's your name? I asked casually. Rena, I told him, realizing I had spoken first. Rena, he repeated, sounding like he was committing it to memory. My name is Robert. Porch. And when I say I'll pay you back, I mean it. I simply nodded and pulled my coat tighter. His bus would arrive shortly, while I still had a long walk through the snow to an empty, unheated apartment. But I would manage. I always managed. Robert looked like he wanted to say something more, but headlights cut through the blizzard in the distance. Porch. When the bus pulled up with a heavy hiss from its air brakes, he looked back at me one last time. Merry Christmas, Rena. Truly, thank you. He stepped aboard. Through the frosted windows, I saw him take a seat and pull out an expensive-looking smartphone. The bus pulled away, leaving me alone in the storm once again. Porch. I sat there on the bench, watching the snow accumulate and replaying the night over and over in my head. Wesley's cruel words echoed through the wind, mixing with the exhaustion deep in my chest. You didn't even know how to take care of me. You missed your chance to be a good mother. Maybe he was right. Maybe I truly had failed, and nothing I did now would ever be enough to make up for it. Porch. The silver angel stayed hidden in my pocket, a symbol of love that nobody wanted. I pulled it out, staring at it under the dim yellow streetlight. Such a tiny thing carrying so much foolish hope. Just as I moved to put it away, the sound of a powerful engine broke through the quiet street. Bright, high-end headlights lit up the road, far too sleek for this rundown neighborhood. Porch. The vehicle slowed as it passed the bus stop, made a clean U-turn at the intersection, and pulled up right beside the curb where I was sitting. The passenger window rolled down smoothly, and my breath caught. It was Robert, the same man I had handed my last $5 to just 10 minutes ago. Except he wasn't on a bus anymore. He was sitting behind the wheel of a luxury Bentley. Porch. Even someone like me, who knew nothing about cars, recognized the iconic emblem and the flawless finish of the vehicle. He looked over and pointed toward the door. Get in, Rena. I stood there in shock, staring at Robert through the lowered window of a vehicle that looked like it belonged to a corporate executive. Porch. The leather interior looked warm and inviting, but my mind couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. How could a man who supposedly couldn't afford $5 for bus fare suddenly show up driving a car that cost more than everything I had earned in my entire life? I don't understand. My voice barely carried over the wind. Porch. Snow was gathering on my shoulders, and the cold had completely numbed my feet. Please, Robert said gently, with real urgency in his tone. You're going to freeze out here. Get in the car. It's warm, and we need to talk. Every instinct built over 63 years warned me never to get into a stranger's car, especially someone surrounded by this many unanswered questions. Porch. But the alternative was walking through a worsening blizzard back to a freezing apartment, spending Christmas Eve alone with the memory of my son turning me away. The passenger door gave a soft click and unlatched. The inside was warm, smelling faintly of clean leather and high-end cologne. Porch. As I settled into the seat, I couldn't help but stare at the dashboard, which looked entirely digital, gleaming with polished metal trim. This wasn't just a nice car. It was the kind of vehicle driven by people with immense wealth and authority. "Thank you," I said softly, still struggling to process the situation. "But I really don't understand. How did you—" Porch. "I owe you an explanation," Robert said, pulling smoothly away from the curb. The ride was so quiet I could barely feel the car moving over the icy road. "And I owe you an apology." His entire presence had shifted. He was composed, confident, and completely in control. Porch. The desperate man searching his pockets at the bus stop was gone, replaced by a professional who carried himself with absolute authority. Yet his eyes in the rearview mirror still held the same sharp focus I had noticed earlier. "Where are we going?" I asked, suddenly realizing I had gotten into a car without even asking where he was taking me. "Somewhere we can talk privately." Porch. "Don't worry, it's a public place. There's a 24-hour diner just down the road." Looking out through the tinted windows, the neighborhood almost looked different. The familiar, run-down streets seemed less intimidating, and other drivers gave the luxury car plenty of space on the road. "You gave me $5, he said after a moment of silence. "Porch. You handed over the last bit of money you had to a complete stranger. How do you know that was my last $5? Robert paused for several seconds, keeping his hands steady on the steering wheel. "Because I've been watching you, Rena. For weeks." A wave of cold dread washed over me. "What?" "It's not what you think," he said quickly, catching the terror on my face in the mirror. Porch. "You were never in any physical danger. But I've been documenting your daily routine, how you treat people, the way you live." I pressed my back against the passenger door, my hand instantly searching for the handle. "Stop the car. Let me out right now." "Rena, please. I know how alarming this sounds, but I promise you aren't in danger. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." Porch. "Trust you?" My voice rose with panic. "You just told me you've been following me and you expect me to trust you?" Robert didn't argue. He turned into the parking lot of a retro 24-hour diner, the kind of place where night shift workers and tired travelers stopped for coffee. Porch. Through the foggy windows, I could see a few patrons sitting inside with their mugs, looking just as exhausted as I felt. He put the car in park and turned off the engine, but made no move to get out. "My name is Robert Hayes," he said, turning fully toward me. "I'm a licensed private investigator. I was hired by a client who paid a significant fee to gather information on you." Porch. The statement hit me like a physical blow. "Information on me? Why?" "Everything," Robert replied in a quiet tone. "Your daily schedule, where you work, who you talk to, how you spend your money, and whether there was any evidence of irresponsible behavior or mental decline." My thoughts raced. Who would hire an investigator to watch an older woman working part-time as a hospital custodian? Porch. I had no enemies, and barely any acquaintances outside of work. Robert looked genuinely conflicted as he continued. "The client wanted proof that you were unfit to manage your own affairs. They wanted a paper trail to show a court that you were unstable, irresponsible, and unable to make sound decisions." The pieces fell into place instantly, leaving a bitter, sickening feeling in my stomach. Porch. "Sarah?" Robert nodded solemnly. "Yes, your daughter-in-law hired me 2 months ago. She wanted formal reports and video documentation to support an upcoming legal action." "A legal action?" I tried to process the words. "What kind of legal action?" "The kind designed to completely terminate your visitation rights with your grandchildren." Porch. "And beyond that, a petition for adult conservatorship, which would grant full control over your financial matters and medical decisions if anything happened to you. It felt like the air had been pulled out of my lungs. Sarah wasn't just driving a wedge between me and Wesley. Orch. She had been methodically building a case to legally erase me from their lives, treating me like an obstacle to be permanently removed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Robert ran a hand through his hair, looking worn down. "Because of what happened tonight. You gave me that $5, even though I knew you had saved it for a warm drink during your night shift. Orch. That one act made it impossible for me to continue." He looked at me with clear respect. "I've monitored your life for 2 months, Rena. I watched you get by on a tiny fixed budget while still helping your elderly neighbor pay for groceries when her check fell short. I watched you stay late at the hospital to help train new custodial workers without asking for extra pay. Orch. I watched you save every spare dollar just to buy holiday gifts for grandchildren who barely know you." Tears began to spill down my cheeks. "So every single day she was having you build a file against me." My voice shook. Every phone call, every attempt to visit, she had been keeping score, trying to frame me as unstable. "It gets worse," Robert said, his tone tightening with frustration. "Orch. She deliberately set traps to make you look bad. That scene at Emma's birthday party was completely manufactured. Sarah instructed Emma ahead of time to ignore you, specifically to trigger an emotional reaction in front of the other guests so she could claim you were erratic. The betrayal was so calculated and absolute that I couldn't even feel anger. There was only a hollow emptiness inside me." Orch. "When did you realize she was setting me up?" "I started seeing the pattern about 3 weeks ago," Robert said. "But tonight, when you gave away what little you had without a second thought, it confirmed everything. I realized I couldn't be a part of what she's trying to do to you." I looked at him through my tears. "So what happens now?" Orch. "Are you going back to tell Sarah whatever she wants to hear?" "No," Robert said firmly. "Now, we put an end to it." The diner's neon lights reflected against the car window, shifting between red and blue across Robert's face. "I don't understand," I said, shaking my head. "Why help me? You don't owe me anything. You could just take her money and walk away." Orch. "I know more than enough," he said, pulling out his phone and unlocking the screen to reveal dozens of photos and logs. "I know you work 2 jobs despite severe joint pain. I know you quietly donate $25 a month to a children's charity even when your own pantry is low. Orch. I know you haven't missed a day of work in 3 years, often taking the toughest shifts so younger coworkers can spend time with their families." Hearing him list those quiet details felt surreal. For months, Wesley had made me feel like an utter failure, but this stranger saw the dignity in everything I had endured. Orch. "And more importantly," Robert continued, his tone turning grave, "I know what Sarah is really after. It isn't just keeping you away from the kids. What do you mean?" "She found out about your life insurance policy," he explained. "The $87,000 policy you've been paying into for decades, with Wesley named as the sole beneficiary. Orch. Her goal is to petition the court for a legal conservatorship. By claiming you are mentally incompetent, she wants Wesley appointed as your legal guardian, giving them immediate authority over your assets and healthcare decisions. That way, no one can question how those funds are handled." The sheer scope of her plan sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't an ordinary family dispute. Orch. It was a cold, calculated move to strip me of my independence. Under a legal conservatorship, an adult loses their fundamental rights. You lose access to your own accounts, your right to choose where you live, and your voice in your own medical care. If Sarah succeeded, she could place me in a state-run facility and take full control over everything I owned. "She can't do that," I said weakly. Orch. "Wesley would never let that happen." "Wesley doesn't know the full story," Robert replied. "He thinks his wife is just protecting their household from an overbearing relative. Sarah is careful to present herself as the reasonable one, convincing him that she is merely setting healthy boundaries." I thought back to the cold expression on Wesley's face at the front door. Porch. How long had Sarah been feeding him those narratives? How many subtle comments had slowly turned him against his own mother? What kind of evidence was she expecting from you? Robert's jaw clenched. Photos showing you looking distressed or neglected. Proof of financial hardship. Any record of unusual behavior around the children. Porch. She even hinted that she wanted recordings of you sounding upset, taken out of context, or a situation that might prompt a wellness check from local authorities. And did you give her any of that? He looked straight into my eyes. The only evidence I gathered proves the exact opposite. You aren't incompetent, Rena. You aren't an unfit mother or grandmother. Porch. You're someone who has been systematically isolated and manipulated by someone trying to take advantage of you. The warmth inside the car finally seemed to reach the chill deep in my bones. Through the diner window, I could see a waitress refilling coffee mugs for her customers, working through Christmas Eve just to make ends meet, much like I had done for decades. Porch. So what do we do? I asked, surprised at how naturally the word we came out. Just hours ago, I was completely alone in the snow. Now, I had someone in my corner. A faint smile crossed Robert's face, softening his sharp features. We let the facts speak for themselves. We give Sarah the platform she's been planning for, where the truth can come out in front of the entire family. Porch. What do you mean? Sarah is hosting a large New Year's Eve gathering, right? She mentioned it during one of our meetings. She wanted documentation ready in time for that event. I nodded. Wesley had mentioned the party in passing, though of course I was never invited. She has no idea I'm stepping away from her assignment, Robert explained. Porch. As far as she knows, I'm still gathering reports to support her claims. That means I have full access to her communications, her instructions, and the evidence showing what she was actually attempting to do. A small glimmer of hope started to form. What are you suggesting? We let her believe everything is going according to plan, Robert said. Porch. We let her keep building her case, and then we lay out the complete documented reality for Wesley and the rest of the family to see. The snow outside was still falling, but the storm didn't feel as threatening anymore. Why? I asked again, needing to understand. Why put your professional reputation on the line for someone you just met? Porch. Robert was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow pile onto the windshield. When he spoke, his voice was steady and quiet. Because 30 years ago, on another freezing Christmas Eve, my family was stranded at a bus stop with nothing left. A woman about your age handed my father $5. I looked at him, completely silent. Porch. My dad had just lost his job, and we had been evicted from our apartment, Robert said. We were trying to reach a shelter downtown before intake closed for the night. Without that $5 for bus fare, we would have been stuck on the street in sub-zero temperatures. That money got us to safety. I took a quiet breath. Porch. It was never about the $5, Rena, Robert said, turning to look at me. It was about the fact that when everyone else treated us like we were invisible, one person treated us like human being mattered. That woman gave my family a chance, and I never had the opportunity to thank her. I saw my reflection in the side mirror. Porch. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the broken person Wesley saw. I felt like someone who deserved to stand tall. I can't pay her back, Robert said, but I can pass it forward, and I think this is the right place to do it. A short time later, Robert brought me to his downtown office, located on the 23rd floor of a high-rise in the Loop. Porch. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glowing skyline of Chicago. The office was sleek and modern, the kind of professional space built for high-stakes work. Standing there in my damp coat and worn boots, I felt completely out of place, but Robert treated me with absolute courtesy. Would you like some coffee? He asked, walking over to a sophisticated espresso machine. Yes, please. Porch. Thank you. My mind was still racing, trying to absorb the reality of the last 2 months. Sarah had hired an investigator to track my every move, treating me like a target in a legal battle. Robert handed me a steaming ceramic mug. The warmth of the drink spread through my hands as he walked over and sat down behind his wide desk. George. I need to show you the files, he said, his expression turning serious. But I want you to be prepared. What you're about to see is going to be difficult to take in. I set down my coffee mug, my hands still trembling slightly. Show me. Robert opened his MacBook and turned the screen toward me. The first thing I saw was a photo of me taken from across the street in a parking lot. George. I was walking out of Aldi, so struggling under the weight of several heavy grocery bags. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 weeks ago. She wanted a full record of your daily routine, Robert explained, clicking to the next slide. She wanted proof that you were facing extreme financial hardship and that you looked. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Mentally unstable. George. The next image showed me standing at the bus stop near my apartment, waiting in the freezing rain because my old Honda wouldn't start. I remembered that day clearly. I was running late for work, frantically calling my hospital supervisor to explain the situation. In the photo, caught in the downpour, I looked completely worn down, distressed, and unkempt. George. Sarah was very specific in her instructions, Robert continued. She wanted photos that made you look like a total liability. Someone who couldn't take care of herself, let alone be trusted around children. The photos kept coming. Me at the register counting out loose change to cover groceries. Me walking to work against the freezing wind because I couldn't afford gas. George. Me on Thanksgiving Day, sitting alone in a cheap highway diner with a discounted turkey dinner because I had nowhere else to go. Every picture felt like a complete invasion of my dignity. What was worse was how neatly the photos formed the narrative Sarah wanted. A broken, struggling older woman hanging on by a thread. Is this what she plans to show, Wesley? I asked, my throat dry. George. That's only part of it, Robert said, clicking on another folder. Brace yourself, here comes the video footage. The video was slightly grainy, clearly captured from a distance with a telephoto lens, but I could recognize myself instantly. It was the park gathering for Emma's 6th birthday, the very day Wesley accused me of making a scene. Watch closely, Robert whispered. George. This is what actually happened. On the screen, I watched myself walk into the park. Emma spotted me and ran over with a huge smile. But before she could reach me, Sarah suddenly stepped in and cut her off. I watched Sarah kneel down and whisper something into Emma's ear. In a split second, the little girl's excitement turned into confusion and fear. George. She told Emma you were sick. Robert's voice cut through the quiet room. She told her you were carrying contagious germs and that she shouldn't get close to you. On the screen, I watched myself try to engage with my granddaughter. I saw Emma pull back, clearly uncomfortable. George. Then Sarah positioned herself between the crowd and the camera, angling her body so that from a distance, it looked like I was forcefully grabbing a child who was terrified of me. In the edited version Sarah gave Wesley, it looks like you were harassing Emma. She deliberately trimmed out the moment she coached the child to run away. Tears streamed down my face. She planned the entire thing. George. Every single detail. Every interaction you've had with the family over the last 3 months was part of Sarah's script, Robert said. She set the stage to make you look erratic. Robert opened another file. This one looked like security camera footage. This is from your hospital's security system. George. 2 weeks ago, Sarah went there posing as a concerned family member, claiming she was checking in on an aging relative whose behavior had become increasingly erratic. On the screen, I saw Sarah talking to my supervisor, Mrs. Chen. Sarah was animated, her brow furrowed in what looked like deep distress. What did she tell Mrs. Chen? George. She claimed you were showing signs of severe paranoia and unpredictable behavior at home. She said Wesley was worried about your mental health, but didn't want to hurt your feelings by bringing it up. She even urged Mrs. Chen to document any mistakes in your job performance in writing, just in case. My stomach dropped. Did Mrs. Chen write anything down? Robert's expression softened. George. Just the opposite. Mrs. Chen told Sarah you were one of their most dependable workers. You never missed a shift, never had a single complaint, and always did your job thoroughly. Mrs. Chen even asked Sarah if she was sure she had the right person. A wave of relief washed over me, followed immediately by sharp anger. She was trying to get me fired, I said through clenched teeth. Exactly. George. She wanted to build a file showing cognitive decline and incompetence. If she could get you dismissed from your job, you would lose your only source of income and become financially dependent on Wesley. That would serve as direct proof that you needed to be placed under legal guardianship. George. All the pieces were coming together, revealing a pattern so calculated and ruthless that it felt suffocating. This went far beyond family resentment. It was a methodical campaign to legally strip away my autonomy. Now for the most important piece, Robert said, his tone turning grave. This is the audio that made it impossible for me to continue working for her. He clicked an audio file. George. The recording was remarkably crisp. Robert had clearly worn a covert recording device during their meeting. I need something definitive. Sarah's voice came through the speakers, cool and authoritative. Something that holds up without question in court. What kind of court proceedings are you expecting? Robert's recorded voice asked. Well, George, if anything happens to Rena, a sudden fall, a medical emergency, anything showing she can't manage on her own, Wesley, as her only son, would step in as her legal guardian. A legal petition requires substantial grounds. We would need to demonstrate incompetence before a judge. My blood ran cold hearing her discuss stripping away my legal rights. George. Once Wesley is appointed guardian, Robert's voice prompted on the tape, he takes full control over her finances, healthcare decisions, everything. Which is the best outcome for everyone, including Rena, Sarah replied coldly. She clearly can't manage her own life anymore. What about her life insurance policy? Robert asked. There was a brief pause before Sarah's voice returned, guarded. George, how did you find out about that? It showed up during the comprehensive financial background check you requested. $87,000, with Wesley named as the sole beneficiary. Right. As it stands, if anything happens to her, Wesley receives that payout directly. But the old woman is stubborn. If she cuts us off, she could easily change her will or update the beneficiary. George. If Wesley is appointed her legal guardian, she won't have the legal capacity to change a thing. A knot formed in my stomach. She wasn't just trying to push me away from my family. She was managing the terms of my life and planning around my eventual passing to ensure she controlled every dollar. Besides, Sarah added with a light laugh, she's getting older and her health is failing. George, nature will take its course sooner rather than later, if you know what I mean. The implication hung in the air like poison. Robert paused the recording and looked at me with deep concern. She isn't just trying to have you declared incompetent, he said softly. She's waiting for your health to fail. George. She wants to ensure that when that time comes, Wesley has absolute control over everything you leave behind, which ultimately means she controls it. I sat in absolute silence, trying to process the level of calculation behind her actions. Over the past few months, Sarah had systematically destroyed my relationship with my son, not out of sudden anger, but through cold, deliberate maneuvering. George. To her, controlling Wesley meant securing full control over my life and my estate. When did you realize what she was really doing? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. About a month ago, the assignment started raising red flags. Her requests became far too specific. She wanted me to capture you doing something reckless. George. She even suggested I try to agitate you into an emotional outburst that could be recorded out of context. Did you ever try to do that? Robert shook his head. I followed you for weeks, Rena. In spite of everything stacked against you, you carried yourself with total dignity. I saw you skip meals just to afford Christmas gifts for grandchildren who barely recognize you. George. I saw you stay late after long shifts to help new employees. I documented every quiet act of kindness. Everything I saw completely contradicted the profile Sarah asked me to build. He opened a final folder on the laptop. It was filled with photos and footage I had never seen before. There was footage of me carrying heavy bags up 3 flights of stairs for my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Porch. Me showing a new custodial worker the proper sanitation procedures for the operating rooms. Me sitting in the diner on Thanksgiving, sharing half my turkey dinner with a stranded man outside. "I've worked as an investigator for 15 years, Robert said. "I know what genuine incapacity and danger look like." Porch. "When I looked at your life, all I saw was a resilient woman being isolated and pressured, yet refusing to lose her decency." Looking at those clips through Robert's lens, I saw myself from an angle I hadn't recognized in years. I wasn't the failure Wesley thought I was, and I certainly wasn't the broken burden Sarah tried to create. Porch. I was a survivor doing my best to remain decent through hard times. "What about tonight?" I asked. "At the bus stop, asking for $5, was that part of your investigation?" Robert looked conflicted. "I was supposed to meet Sarah tonight to deliver the final report. But I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't hand over fabricated evidence designed to destroy someone's life." Porch. "I went to that bus stop intending to take a bus downtown and simply walk away from the contract." "Then why didn't you have bus fare?" "I tossed my wallet into a dumpster 6 blocks back," he said with a wry smile. "I felt so thoroughly compromised by the assignment that I didn't want to carry the money she paid me." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Porch. When you handed me that $5 bill, knowing it was the last bit of money you had for your shift, everything clicked into place. A woman who had been portrayed as completely selfish and unstable gave away her last dollars to help a stranger. That was all the confirmation I needed to know that everything Sarah said was a total lie." "So what do we do now?" I asked. Porch. "Sarah is still expecting your report." A genuine smile finally reached Robert's eyes. "She's going to get a report. Just not the one she's expecting." He pulled the laptop closer and opened an extensive document. "For the last 2 months, I've kept a meticulous log of this case, Rena. Every conversation with Sarah, every instruction she gave me, every manipulation she planned. Porch. I have enough documented evidence to prove that Wesley has been fed false information by someone who views your estate as an opportunity." Will Wesley actually believe it? He was completely convinced tonight that I was the problem. Porch. When he sees the unedited security footage, and when he hears his wife's own voice outlining how to have his mother declared legally incompetent for financial control, he won't be able to ignore it. He'll realize that every negative narrative pushed over the last 3 months was intentionally manufactured. Robert closed the laptop and looked at me intently. Porch. "I have to be upfront with you, Rena. When the truth comes out, it's going to be difficult. Sarah will not give up easily. She has invested too much time into this plan to simply walk away." I thought back to Wesley's cold words at the door, to my grandchildren who barely knew my face, and to the complete isolation that waited for me if nothing changed. Porch. Then I remembered Sarah's recorded voice, casually discussing my future as a financial calculation. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet. Go home and let things proceed normally. Sarah has no idea I've changed course. She's planning a New Year's Eve party, where she hopes to gather final material. Let her think everything is going according to plan." And then, Robert's smile turned sharp. Porch. "Then we let your family see the full picture. We make sure that when this is over, you reclaim the standing and respect she tried to take from you." As I stood up and pulled my damp coat around me, Robert spoke my name. "Rena." I turned around. 30 years ago, the woman who helped my family had graying hair and kind eyes. She wore a worn winter coat. Porch. She looked like someone who wouldn't hesitate to give her last $5 to a stranger. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time they weren't from grief. For the first time in years, someone truly saw me, not as a burden or a failed parent, but as a person with dignity worth standing up for. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you," Robert said. Porch. You reminded me why I got into this work in the first place, to uncover the truth, not to manufacture lies. As the elevator carried me back down to the ground floor, a feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time settled over me. Hope. A steady, quiet hope. The story wasn't over yet. There was still time to set the record straight and reclaim my place in my own family. Sarah thought she held all the cards, but she had made a fundamental mistake. She underestimated the power of ordinary decency, and she had no idea what people were willing to do to defend it. The next morning was Christmas Day. I woke up in my quiet apartment feeling completely different. Everything around me looked the same. The worn couch, the radiator knocking steadily against the wall, and the single window looking out onto the brick alleyway. But knowing that Robert was out there and that I wasn't facing this alone made even this modest apartment feel manageable. My phone rang at 9 in the morning sharp. I hesitated for a moment. For an older person living on her own, an unfamiliar number usually meant a sales call or an overdue notice, but something urged me to answer. "Merry Christmas, Rena." It was Robert's calm, reassuring voice. "Merry Christmas," I replied, the words feeling unfamiliar. I had spent the last 3 holidays completely alone, ever since Sarah convinced Wesley that holidays should be strictly reserved for their immediate household. "I'm sorry to call so early," Robert said, his tone turning serious, "but we need to meet. Something happened and our timeline just moved up." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" "Sarah called me at 7 this morning. She's pushing up our final meeting. She wants to present my findings to Wesley tomorrow, December 26th. She isn't waiting for New Year's Eve." I sat down heavily on the edge of the sofa in my worn robe. Why the sudden rush? "I think she's getting restless. Maybe she sensed something was off during our last exchange. Or maybe she just wants to close this out and secure her outcome. Either way, we have far less time than we anticipated. What does that mean for us? It means we have to move quickly. Can you meet me this afternoon? There are documents you need to review, and we have decisions to make." After hanging up, I made a cup of instant coffee, trying to wrap my head around the sudden shift. Sarah moving up the timeline meant she was either extremely confident or running out of patience. Neither option was comforting. I spent the morning keeping busy with chores, but my mind kept drifting back to Wesley. Was he sitting down to a lavish holiday dinner with Sarah's family? Were my grandchildren opening presents that I had never been allowed to give them? After slamming the door in my face the night before, had Wesley thought of me even once? At 2 in the afternoon, I met Robert at a family diner on the other side of town. It was the kind of place that stayed open on Christmas to serve people who had nowhere else to turn. Older folks on their own, shift workers grabbing a quick meal, and families looking for an affordable option. Compared to his corporate office downtown, this felt far more familiar. Robert was already waiting in a corner booth. He looked tired, but his gaze was steady. He had swapped his sharp suit for jeans and a simple sweater, though his professional demeanor was still unmistakable. "I spent the morning reviewing all the files," he said, as soon as I sat down. "I wanted to make sure nothing was overlooked, and I found something that explains why Sarah is in such a hurry." He pulled out a tablet and brought up a legal document filled with dense terminology, but my name was clearly printed across the top. Cook County Probate Court, Illinois. "What is this?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "It's an emergency petition for adult conservatorship." Sarah prepared and filed it quietly 3 weeks ago. "The petition claims that you are experiencing rapid cognitive decline and that you pose an immediate risk to your own welfare." The words blurred together on the screen. A risk to my own welfare? She listed detailed allegations of erratic behavior, unexplained absences from work, which we know is completely false. Failing to manage basic household bills, another fabrication. She even claimed you made statements about wanting to give up, which is completely untrue. My hand shook as I held the tablet. She's actually trying to have a judge declare me legally incompetent. It's worse than that, Robert said quietly. She filed for emergency temporary authority. If a judge signs off on an emergency basis, Wesley immediately gains legal authority over your residence, healthcare, and finances. In many cases involving low-income seniors, these temporary petitions can move through the court system with minimal initial review. I felt a tight weight in my chest. When is the hearing? January 3rd. That's why she's rushing. If she attaches my official report tomorrow as supporting evidence of your alleged decline, the petition looks solid on paper. She built this case piece by piece, leaving nothing to chance. The air in the diner felt suddenly heavy. She's going to win, isn't she? Wesley will believe the fabricated report, and a judge will take their word for it. Not if we get to Wesley first, Robert said, leaning forward with complete focus. I spent the entire morning working through this. Sarah's biggest weakness is her absolute confidence. She thinks she has controlled every single variable, but she made one critical mistake. What mistake? She hired an honest investigator. He swiped to another screen showing an extensive timeline. Every interaction between Sarah and me was recorded. In fact, she insisted on regular progress check-ins herself. Every directive she gave, every false claim she made, every manipulation she planned is documented right here. I looked at the timeline, the dates matching the painful moments from the past few months. The incident at Emma's party, her unannounced visit to my workplace, and Wesley's growing coldness toward me. This proves Sarah was orchestrating everything behind the scenes, Robert said. More importantly, it shows a clear intent to obtain legal authority through misrepresentation. This wasn't about protecting the children. It was a calculated effort to take control of your legal standing and assets. Robert swiped to another document on the tablet. There's one more thing. I discovered this while reviewing the financial records she authorized me to access. On the screen was a bank statement from Chase Bank. What am I looking at? This is Wesley's primary checking account. To facilitate the background check on you, Sarah added my firm as an authorized party to review their records. Look at the outgoing transactions over the last 6 months. I scanned the rows of numbers, trying to understand what they meant. Regular payroll deposits, routine utility payments, and then several unusually large withdrawals. Look right here, Robert pointed to a series of debits. In October, a payment of $1,500 to Legal Services LLC. In November, another $2,000. Last week, $3,000. What kind of legal service is that? That's the law firm handling Sarah's conservatorship petition. Wesley has been paying the legal fees to have his own mother declared legally incompetent, completely unaware of what that money was actually being used for. The realization hit hard. Sarah hadn't just turned Wesley against me emotionally. She had used his own bank account to fund the legal campaign against his mother. And look at this transaction from 2 months ago, Robert added, his tone darkening. He pointed to a line item that read, Private Investigation Services, R. Hayes Consulting, $5,000. Wesley paid your retainer to investigate me, I murmured, without knowing the true purpose of the expense, Robert said. Sarah told him the funds were for a business background check on a potential partner. She's been using Wesley's own money to finance every step of this effort. I stared at the numbers, trying to process the full weight of it. My son had unwittingly paid thousands of dollars to place me under surveillance, gather false claims against me, and sever the remaining bond between us. How much time do we have before she shows this fabricated report to Wesley? She asked to meet me at my office tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon. She plans to take the file and present the so-called findings to Wesley over dinner tomorrow evening. After that, she intends to submit the updated petition to the court. The hearing is on January 3rd, I said, closing my eyes. That's barely a week away. How can we undo months of manipulation in a single week? How do we convince Wesley that his wife has been orchestrating all of this? I don't even have the money to hire an attorney to contest the petition. I can't fight this, I said quietly. Even with your help, even knowing the truth, I don't have the resources to go up against Sarah's legal representation. Orch. Robert sat in silence for a moment, stirring his coffee. When he looked up, his tone was steady and resolute. If you fight within the framework Sarah designed, the odds are against you. But what if we change the terms entirely? What do you mean? Sarah's entire strategy depends on controlling the narrative, presenting curated information to Wesley at a specific time. Orch. But what happens if Wesley receives the complete, unedited facts before she ever gets the chance to speak? He won't listen to me. He made that crystal clear on Christmas Eve. He might not listen to you, but he will listen to his wife's own voice on tape, explaining how to manipulate him and take control of his family's assets. Robert leaned in closer. Orch. Sarah has no idea I'm no longer working for her. She expects to walk into my office tomorrow afternoon to collect the file that will finalize her petition. But what if I hand the actual file directly to Wesley instead? You want to tell Wesley everything? I want to lay out the full documentation for him. The audio recordings, the financial records, and the complete timeline of Sarah's actions. Orch. I want him to hear directly how his wife planned to use the legal system to take control of his mother's life and assets. My heart began to beat faster. Will he accept it? The evidence is objective. Wesley was misled, but he isn't blind to facts. When he sees the documentation and hears Sarah's own words, the situation will speak for itself. Orch. For the first time since this ordeal started, a genuine sense of clarity emerged. When do you plan to speak with him? First thing tomorrow morning. I'll reach out to him at 8, let him know I have urgent findings regarding the matter Sarah initiated, and arrange to meet him before she can execute her plan. And then? A sharp, determined look crossed Robert's face. Orch. Then we let Sarah walk into the situation she created. She thinks she's finalizing her petition tomorrow afternoon, but she'll be walking into a meeting where her husband already knows the full truth. I pictured the scene. Sarah, completely prepared to present her manufactured claims, unaware that her husband had already seen the documentation behind her actions. Orch. The prospect was daunting, yet grounded in simple accountability. What if it doesn't work? I asked. What if Wesley still refuses to believe it, even with the recordings? Robert's expression turned firm. Then we present the documentation directly to the probate court. The evidence is more than enough to show that the petition is based on misrepresentation. Orch. It would be a difficult legal process, but the facts are on our side. He looked directly at me. And if the legal process encounters obstacles, I will make sure you have proper legal representation and support so that Sarah cannot interfere with your autonomy. I didn't press him on the details. The reassurance itself carried significant weight. Orch. I have to ask you one thing, I said, my voice quiet. I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Why are you going to these lengths for me? You mentioned the $5 from 30 years ago, but this involves your professional standing and significant personal effort. When someone who operates like Sarah loses control of a situation, they push back hard. Orch. Robert remained silent for several seconds, looking out the window at the quiet, snow-covered street. When he turned back, there was a quiet, personal sorrow in his eyes. My mother passed away 3 years ago, he said softly. She had Alzheimer's. Orch. In the final stages, my sister and I had to move her into a specialized memory care facility because her medical needs became too complex to manage at home. He looked down for a moment. During her last 2 years, she often didn't recognize us. Orch. But during brief moments of clarity, she would express deep distress, feeling isolated, and wondering why her family wasn't around, even though we were by her side every day. The condition took her memory, but left behind feelings of loneliness and fear. I reached across the table and placed my hand gently over his. I'm so sorry. Orch. Over the last 2 months, he continued, holding my hand, Watching Sarah systematically isolate you from your family. Watching you wait in the freezing cold, seeing you turned away by your own son, it brought all of that back. He met my eyes with complete resolve. The difference is that your isolation wasn't caused by an illness. It was deliberately engineered by someone who should have treated you with respect. I couldn't stop my mother's illness years ago, but I can step in and ensure the truth comes out for you today. Maybe doing this helps bring some resolution to things I couldn't change back then. I understood now. This went beyond a simple return of a favor. It was about two people who understood what it meant to face hardship within a family, choosing to ensure that truth and fairness prevailed. What do you need me to do next? I asked. Go home. Act naturally. If Sarah or Wesley reaches out, don't give the slightest hint that anything has changed. Tomorrow morning, everything shifts. As we prepared to leave the diner, Robert handed me a small black device, roughly the size of an older pager, featuring a single prominent red button. What's this? An emergency GPS communicator. If anything goes sideways, if Sarah senses something is wrong, if she shows up unexpectedly, or if you feel unsafe for even a second, press this. It triggers an immediate high-priority alert on my phone, and I'll have local authorities dispatched to your exact location. Holding the small gadget in my palm was both reassuring and chilling. Do you really think I'll need to use it? Robert looked grim. I hope you never have to touch it. But Sarah has invested an enormous amount of time and effort into this scheme. When someone realizes they've completely lost control of a situation, they can become unpredictable. Walking back to my apartment through the quiet Christmas night, I tried to prepare myself mentally for what lay ahead. Tomorrow, the whole truth would finally come out. Wesley would learn what his wife had been orchestrating behind the scenes, and I would either get my family back or face the reality of being permanently estranged. Either way, the long period of uncertainty was finally reaching its end. I barely slept that night. Every little sound in the apartment building made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway, the low groan of the pipes, the mechanical creak of the old elevator. By 6 a.m, I gave up trying to rest and brewed a pot of coffee with shaking hands. Robert had mentioned he would reach out to Wesley at 8. That gave me 2 long hours to sit with my thoughts, imagining every worst-case scenario. What if Wesley refused to take the meeting? What if the narrative Sarah had fed him ran so deep that he dismissed the evidence altogether? At 7:30, my phone buzzed. Robert's voice was steady and completely focused. "We're moving," he said. Wesley agreed to sit down with me at 9. I told him I uncovered critical information regarding the inquiry Sarah initiated, involving significant legal risks that required an immediate, in-person discussion. Skeptical, but not combative. Mostly, I think he's curious about what turned up. After all, Sarah has been building up expectations for weeks about a file that would supposedly confirm her claims. After hanging up, I paced back and forth in my small living room like a caged animal. I tried cleaning frantically to stay occupied, reorganizing an already spotless linen closet 3 times, doing anything to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spiral. At 9:15, Robert called back. "He knows," Robert said directly, skipping any small talk. I walked him through the entire file. The audio recordings, the financial records, and the full timeline of Sarah's actions. How is he taking it? A sudden wave of relief rushed through me, so intense I had to steady myself against the wall to keep from falling, exactly as you'd expect. Complete shock at first, then absolute disbelief, followed by a total breakdown. Looking at the documentation and hearing his wife's own voice, he kept holding his head in his hands, repeatedly asking himself how he could have been so blind, how he could have allowed his own mother to be treated that way. "What did you say to him?" I gave him the facts. I told him that Sarah is a master manipulator, and manipulation only works because the victim loves and trusts the person doing it. Wesley isn't foolish, Rena. He was simply systematically deceived by the person he had every reason to trust most. I closed my eyes, letting the reality of those words settle in. After months of cold distance and rejection, my son finally knew the truth. George. What happens next? Wesley wanted to head straight home to confront Sarah right then and there, but I persuaded him to hold off. Sarah is scheduled to arrive at my office at 4 this afternoon to pick up the final report. Wesley will get there ahead of time and wait in the adjacent conference room behind the one-way glass, listening to every single word she says. George. You want her on the record without any room for denial. I want her to lay out her intentions clearly, leaving no possible way to explain it away. In front of Wesley, Sarah has always played the role of a well-meaning partner who is just trying to protect the household. George. But when she believes she has completely succeeded and is about to receive the documents to strip away your rights, the mask will drop entirely. Robert's strategy was simple and decisive. Sarah would walk into what she assumed was a final victory, expecting to collect the leverage to push me out of their lives. George. Instead, she would lay out her own wrongdoing in front of the very person she had been manipulating. I need to remind you, Robert added, when Sarah realizes the situation has turned against her, she may react with extreme hostility. She might head straight for your apartment once the pretense is gone. I understand. Keep the emergency device with you at all times. George. If she shows up at your door or attempts to intimidate you in any way, press the button immediately. The rest of the morning dragged on with agonizing slowness. I tried to imagine what Wesley was going through. Finding out that the person you built a life with had spent months plotting against your own mother had to bring an overwhelming mixture of guilt, anger, and betrayal. George. If I were in his shoes, that weight would have torn me apart. At 11 sharp, Wesley's name lit up my phone screen. For a second, the breath caught in my throat. Mom. His voice was so hoarse and cracked it was barely recognizable, thick with the sound of someone who had been breaking down in tears. Wesley. I had to clear my throat just to answer. Mom, George. Oh God, I don't even know where to begin. The things I said to you on Christmas Eve, the way I treated you for months. His voice gave out entirely, and I could hear him sobbing on the other end of the line. Wesley, please don't do this to yourself. Let me say this, Mom. I was awful to you. Completely unfair. And all because I listened to George. Because she made me believe. He took a ragged breath, fighting to steady his voice. I am so sorry, Mom. I am so deeply sorry. My own tears were flowing freely now. It's okay. You had no way of knowing the truth. I should have known. You're my mother. I should have trusted you instead of taking her word for everything. George. I should have questioned why suddenly everything you did was being twisted into something malicious and unstable. Sarah is very skilled at controlling the narrative, I said gently. She made sure you only saw what she wanted you to see. Mom, I ended up using my own money, thousands of dollars, to fund legal steps against you. My own accounts were being used to try to put you under state care. George. If it hadn't been for Robert. The anguish in his voice was almost unbearable to hear. Wesley, listen to me. The only thing that matters right now is that you know the truth. It's behind us now, and we're going to get through this together. Can you ever forgive me for putting you through this? You're my son, I replied simply. There's nothing to forgive. George. We stayed on the phone for nearly an hour. Wesley walked me through how Sarah had gradually shifted his perspective over time, slowly wearing down his trust in me. She always framed her concerns around being reasonable and caring, while quietly painting every move I made in the worst possible light. She reframed our ordinary conversations until I seemed erratic and demanding. George. That ornament, Wesley said suddenly, his tone turning quiet. The one you brought over on Christmas Eve. What was it? I told him the story of the sterling silver angel, explaining how I had held on to that sentiment for 35 years, hoping for the day our relationship would be strong enough to share something with so much history behind it. George. I want it, he said, his voice earnest and urgent. "I want that ornament. I want us to hang it on our Christmas tree together." "What about Sarah?" I asked. Wesley's voice turned hard as stone. "Sarah won't be part of this family much longer." By 3:30 that afternoon, the quiet inside my apartment became too overwhelming to handle. I walked over to the local neighborhood park, needing the cold air and the movement to settle my nerves. Robert's emergency device rested heavily in my coat pocket, a constant reminder of how volatile things could get. At 4:15, my phone rang. "It's over." Robert's voice came through, sounding cold and utterly exhausted. Sarah showed her true colors completely. "What happened?" She walked into my office thinking she was here to celebrate a done deal. When I placed the mock file in front of her, the fabricated summary claiming severe cognitive decline and instability, she was openly thrilled. Absolutely triumphant. My stomach tightened. What did she say? Things that no decent person would ever say about another human being, let alone her husband's mother. She openly discussed how this would give her total control over the household assets. She talked about finally cutting off your access to the kids for good, boasting that Wesley would even thank her for protecting the family from an unstable relative. And Wesley heard all of it? Every single word. Right as Sarah started laying out which low-cost state facility she intended to place you in. Once the conservatorship was granted, Wesley walked straight out of the conference room. I could only picture the scene. Sarah, riding high on what she thought was total victory, suddenly turning around to face her husband, who had just heard every calculating detail with his own ears. How did she react? Panic. Then pure rage, followed by a scramble of flimsy excuses. She tried claiming she did it all for Wesley's benefit, and when that fell apart, she tried accusing me of taking bribes from you to set her up. But it was far too late. Wesley heard her own voice, laying out a plan to misappropriate his mother's finances and push her out of their lives. Where is she now? Gone. Wesley told her to pack her belongings and vacate the premises immediately. He's formally filing for divorce first thing in the morning based on severe misrepresentation and irreconcilable differences, alongside an emergency temporary protective order. Until the court reviews the case, Sarah won't be allowed any contact with the children without a court-appointed monitor present. The total reversal of fortune left my head spinning. Just 12 hours earlier, Sarah had been on the verge of stripping away my autonomy. Now, she had lost her home, her marriage, and the unrestricted access to the children she had used as leverage against me. "Wesley wants to see you," Robert added. "Tonight, whenever you feel ready." He's at home with Emma and little James right now, explaining things to them. He wants to make sure they understand that Grandma Rena was never the person they were told to avoid. My heart pounded. "Are you sure they want to see me?" After everything that was said, Wesley has been talking with them openly. Emma is old enough to understand that she was given false information. She's been feeling terrible about how she pulled away from you at her birthday party. An hour later, I stood on the porch of Wesley's house once again. But this time, everything felt completely different. It was the same house, with the same warm light glowing through the windows. But I was no longer an unwelcome outsider. I was a grandmother finally being welcomed home. Before I could even reach for the doorbell, the front door swung wide open. Wesley stood there, his eyes red and swollen from crying, his face marked by deep exhaustion and remorse. For a brief moment, we simply looked at each other, mother and son, looking across a gap that had been artificially created between us. "Mom," he choked out, pulling me into a fierce, tight embrace. We stood on the porch holding on to each other, both of us in tears, trying to process the simple reality that the nightmare was finally over. When we finally stepped back, I noticed 6-year-old Emma peeking around the corner of the entryway, her wide eyes filled with uncertainty. "It's okay, sweetheart," Wesley called out gently. "Come over and see your grandmother." Emma took careful, hesitant steps forward, clearly trying to make sense of the sudden change in atmosphere. Right behind her, 4-year-old James came toddling along, clutching a stuffed animal and watching the room with wide-eyed innocence. "Grandma Rena," Emma began timidly. "Daddy said. Mommy told stories that weren't true. Daddy said you're really nice, and that you love us a lot." Orch. I knelt down so I was right at eye level with her. My heart ached for this little girl who had done nothing wrong and had simply been used as a pawn in someone else's agenda. "I love you very, very much," I said softly, my eyes welling up again. "And if I ever did anything that made you feel scared or confused, I'm truly sorry." Orch. "Daddy said you brought me a present for my birthday, but Mommy told me not to take it," Emma said, looking down. "I did bring one," I told her gently, "and I have plenty more saved up at home waiting for whenever you're ready for them." Emma looked up at Wesley, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around my neck with surprising strength. "Orch. I'm sorry, Grandma. I wasn't very nice to you," she whispered against my shoulder. "You were just listening to the grown-ups around you, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong at all." As Emma let go, little James waddled over, studying me intently with his dark, serious eyes. Rena?" He tried to sound out the syllables. "That's right," I said with a wet smile. "I'm Grandma Rena." Orch. James thought about it for a second, then solemnly held out his stuffed animal toward me like an offering. "Bear," he announced proudly. "That is a very handsome bear," I told him. In return, I received a shy, bright grin. Wesley gave me a full tour of the house. It no longer felt like the cold, exclusive fortress it had seemed just 2 days prior. Orch. It felt like a warm, welcoming home where I finally belonged. He showed me that he had already taken down every photo featuring Sarah and packed her personal belongings into boxes in the garage. He didn't want any reminders around of the person who had nearly torn his family apart. As the evening went on, Emma opened up completely. Orch. She led me to her room, showing me her toy collection and the artwork she had made in kindergarten. James followed us around like a little shadow, regularly handing me toy cars and crayons for inspection. In this space where family bonds had been intentionally cut off for months, we began the quiet, hopeful work of rebuilding our connection. Orch. "There's something you need to know, Mom," Wesley told me quietly in the hallway after we tucked the kids into bed. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for my mistakes and for allowing any of this to happen in the first place." "Wesley, you don't have to say that." "Yes, I do. I nearly lost you completely because I wasn't paying attention to the reality right in front of me. Orch. I promise you, I will never let anyone come between us again." Once the children were asleep, Wesley and I sat in the living room, the very space I had been turned away from 2 nights earlier, talking well past midnight. Orch. He wanted to know every detail of what had happened over the past few months, how I had managed to keep going under the pressure of Sarah's actions, and whether I truly found it in my heart to forgive him. "There's one more matter," Wesley said, suddenly remembering. "That conservatorship petition Sarah filed. We need to make sure it's formally dismissed." Orch. "Did Robert mention how complicated that process will be? If someone contests it, it can be drawn out. But since it was based entirely on false premises, and we have her own recorded statements acknowledging the misrepresentations, it should be straightforward. Robert mentioned he's already handling the court filings." Wesley pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. Orch. "Robert sent this an hour ago," Wesley said with a relieved smile. "The petition has been officially dismissed by the judge. On top of that, the court issued a formal caution to the attorney who filed it. You're completely safe, Mom, legally and otherwise." As I got ready to leave, Wesley handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. "I want you to have this back," he said. I opened the lid. Orch. Inside was the sterling silver angel ornament I had brought on Christmas Eve. Wesley had retrieved it from the entryway table where I had left it in despair, and now he was placing it back in my hands. "I want you to keep it," he said softly, "as a reminder that no matter what anyone tries to do, We are family. Real family. Nothing Sarah did could ever change that. Porch. I held the silver angel up to the light, watching it catch the warm glow from the Christmas tree. Such a small object, carrying so much meaning. A restored bond, genuine hope, and a family brought back together. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, Mom, Wesley replied. Thank you for never giving up on us, even when we lost our way. Porch. That night, Robert insisted on driving me back to my apartment himself. He said he didn't want me processing such an intense evening all on my own. Sitting in the quiet, smooth ride of the car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete, uninterrupted peace. How does it feel? Robert asked, turning toward me as we pulled up outside my building. Porch. It feels like I can finally breathe again, I told him honestly. For months I felt like I was drowning, like everything I did only made things worse. But now you have your family back. And I have you, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came out. I looked directly into his eyes. Porch. Whatever this turns into, wherever life takes us, I want you to know that you didn't just help fix my relationship with Wesley. You pulled me back from giving up on life entirely. Robert's smile was warm and full of understanding. You helped me too, Rena. You reminded me why the truth matters, and why standing up for good people is worth whatever effort it takes. Porch. Climbing the stairs back to my apartment, my steps felt lighter than they had in months. Tomorrow, Sarah would begin facing the legal realities of her actions. Wesley would move forward with the divorce proceedings, and I would begin the steady process of rebuilding my relationship with my grandchildren. Tonight, I was simply a woman who had seen her family restored against all odds. Porch. And it had all started on a freezing winter night, by offering a $5 act of kindness to a stranger at a bus stop. A stranger who ended up becoming the steadfast ally I needed most. The silver angel rested on my kitchen table, catching the soft glow of the overhead light. Porch. Tomorrow, Wesley and I would hang it on the tree together, marking the first of many new traditions as our family began to heal. 6 months later, summer had arrived in Chicago. I stood in the bright, open kitchen of my new apartment, located in a quiet neighborhood in Oak Park, just a 10-minute drive from Wesley's house. Porch. I was watching my granddaughter, Emma, help me frost cupcakes for little James's 5th birthday party. Flour was dusted through her dark hair and chocolate frosting was smudged across her cheek, but she was completely focused, carefully piping small designs onto every single cupcake. Like this, Grandma Rena? She asked, proudly holding up her work. That's perfect, sweetheart. Porch. James is going to love them. It was still hard to believe how much my life had transformed since that freezing night when I handed my last $5 to a stranger at a transit stop. That stranger had become far more than an ally against Sarah's schemes. Is Robert coming to the party? Emma asked, as if reading my mind. He'll be here soon, I said, unable to hide my smile. Porch. He should be arriving any minute. Emma beamed. Great. He promised he'd show James how to fold those paper airplanes that fly all the way across the yard. Over the past few months, Robert had become an essential part of our lives, evolving far beyond what I could have imagined. What began as professional assistance had grown into a genuine, deeply personal bond. Porch. He joined us for regular family dinners, used his legal knowledge to help Wesley navigate the complicated divorce paperwork, and completely won over both children with his patience and dry humor. As for Sarah, she was entirely out of our lives. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, with the court granting Wesley full legal custody of the children. Porch. Sarah was ordered to reimburse the funds she had diverted from Wesley's accounts, along with significant restitution. Once her documented misrepresentations and attempts to manipulate the legal system were presented to the judge, her financial claims against Wesley fell apart entirely. Porch. During the first few weeks after everything came to light, she tried repeatedly to contact Wesley with lengthy, frantic messages, claiming she was only trying to protect the household and accusing others of orchestrating a campaign against her. Porch. But when Wesley presented her attorney with the direct recordings of her outlining plans to put me in a state facility, her legal position completely collapsed. The last update we heard was that she had relocated to Florida to stay with her parents, working retail at a local shopping center, while continuing to insist to anyone who would listen that she had been treated unfairly. Wesley blocked her across all platforms, and a comprehensive protective order ensured she could not approach the children or me without legal consequences. "Grandma, will you tell me the bus stop story again?" Emma asked as we finished the last tray of cupcakes. It had become her favorite bedtime story. The account of how helping a stranger on a difficult night had changed the course of our whole family. "All right," I said, taking a seat at the kitchen counter. It was Christmas Eve, and the snow was coming down hard. I was feeling very down because I had just been turned away from your house. "Because of the stories Mommy made up," Emma said seriously. At her age, she had developed a remarkable clarity about the mistakes the adults had made. Right. So I sat on that bench feeling completely alone in the world, and then I saw someone who needed a hand. He didn't have bus fare, and I only had $5 left in my purse, but I gave it to him anyway. Even though that was your hot chocolate money," Emma chimed in, knowing every beat of the story by heart. "Even though it was my hot chocolate money. And do you know why I gave it to him? Because doing the right thing matters, even when you're having a hard time." "Exactly. And because I chose to show kindness on a difficult night, something wonderful came out of it." "You found Robert," Emma declared happily. "I found Robert," I agreed with a laugh. "And through Robert, I found my way back to all of you." The doorbell rang, and Emma hopped down from the stool instantly. "I'll get it! That has to be Robert!" She was right. Robert stood in the doorway with little James, riding on his shoulders, both of them grinning ear to ear. James had clearly convinced Robert to take him to the local park before the party started, and they both looked windswept and completely happy. "Did you two have fun?" I asked, stepping over to give Robert a warm welcome. James slid down from his shoulders and ran off to show Emma an interesting rock he had found in the grass. "The best kind of fun," Robert said, wrapping an arm comfortably around my waist. "Though I have to admit, pushing a 5-year-old on a swing for an hour straight is quite the workout." I couldn't help but smile. The sheer normalcy of our routine still felt like a wonderful surprise. Sharing everyday moments with a man who had entered my life during such a dramatic turn of events was something I never took for granted. We had been officially dating for 4 months, though Robert always insisted his feelings had developed much earlier. "I respected who you were long before you ever knew me," he told me one summer evening as we walked through the neighborhood. "Watching you carry yourself with so much dignity under impossible pressure, seeing you treat people with kindness after everything you'd been through, it was impossible not to care about you. Even when I looked completely exhausted, counting change at the grocery store," I had teased. "Especially then. You had every reason to be bitter, but you chose to be decent instead." The afternoon birthday party was everything a gathering for a 5-year-old should be: loud, chaotic, and filled with nonstop laughter. Wesley had invited several friends from James's preschool, and the apartment was soon filled with energetic kids and parents doing their best to keep up. Watching Robert help James blow out his candles, and seeing Emma happily tugging on Wesley's arm during party games, I felt a deep sense of contentment I thought I had lost forever. This was what family was supposed to feel like. A little messy, full of activity, but grounded in genuine care. "Mom," Wesley said, coming over as I was gathering wrapping paper from the floor. "Do you have a minute to talk out on the patio?" We stepped outside into the evening air, the sound of the party drifting softly behind us. Wesley looked a bit nervous, which immediately caught my attention. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Everything is great," Wesley said, taking a breath with a broad smile. "Actually, it's wonderful news, but I wanted to talk to you first." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. My heart skipped a beat. Wesley, what is this? Oh, it's not from me, he said quickly, his grin widening. I picked it up from the jeweler for Robert. He asked me to help him choose it, and he plans to propose to you tomorrow night. I stared at the box, trying to process what my son was telling me. He's proposing? I murmured. Yes. Porch. He has a dinner planned downtown tomorrow evening, but he made sure to ask for my blessing first, as well as Emma's and James's. We all told him that if he didn't ask you soon, we'd step in and do it for him. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at my son. Porch. The man who had once been misled was now fully in my corner, completely supportive of my happiness and welcoming a partner who had earned his respect. He actually asked for your blessing? He said he knows how much family means to you, and he wanted to make sure everyone felt comfortable with him becoming a permanent part of our lives. Wesley's expression was full of affection. Porch. I told him he's already family to us. The proposal just makes it official. I opened the box with steady fingers. The ring was classic and understated. A single, elegant diamond, perfectly suited to my taste without being overly flashy. Do you like it? Wesley asked gently. I love it, I said, looking up at him with deep appreciation. And I love that he spoke with you first. Porch. I love that our family is strong enough to grow and welcome someone new. You deserve this happiness, Mom. After everything you endured and all the sacrifices you made over the years, you deserve every bit of joy Robert brings into your life. We stood on the patio for a few more minutes, watching the streetlights flicker on across Oak Park. A year ago, I was facing a bleak and isolated future. Porch. Now my family was whole. My grandchildren were part of my daily life, and a dedicated partner was planning to ask for my hand. There's one more thing, Mom, Wesley added, his tone turning serious as we turned to head back inside. Robert wanted me to mention this to you as well. He isn't just proposing marriage. Porch. He wants to ensure our family structure is completely secure from a legal standpoint. What do you mean? As you know, I have sole legal custody of Emma and James now. But Robert wants to make sure there are zero vulnerabilities down the line, so no one can ever challenge our family arrangements in court. Porch. I'm already completing the formal adoption process for Emma and James, so there is no ambiguity about my role as their sole legal father. But Robert wants to take it a step further. A step further? I asked, puzzled. Robert wants to formally adopt me as an adult. My hand twitched, nearly dropping the velvet box. Adopt you? But you're an adult in your 30s, and your father... Porch. My father passed away years ago, and adult adoption is entirely standard in the legal system, Wesley explained patiently. Robert never married and has no children of his own. He wants me recognized as his legal son, and Emma and James as his legal grandchildren. By establishing that formal legal relationship between you, Robert, and me, our family becomes completely secure under the law. Porch. No outside party could ever attempt to contest our estate or custody arrangements. On top of that, he is establishing an irrevocable trust for the kids. The sheer level of consideration behind the plan left me overwhelmed. Robert wasn't just asking to share a life with me. Porch. He was stepping fully into our family, using his resources, experience, and foresight to build a permanent safeguard around all of us, ensuring that the instability of the past could never happen again. What did you tell him? I asked quietly. I told him it would be an absolute honor to have him as my legal father and as a grandfather to the kids, Wesley said, his eyes shining. Porch. He cares about the children, Mom, and he cares about me. He genuinely considers us his family. Back inside, the party was winding down. Parents were rounding up tired kids and packing away leftover treats, while James was showing signs of running out of energy for the day. Porch. I looked over and saw Robert sitting on the floor, showing Emma how to adjust the wings on a paper airplane, while James leaned his head against Robert's shoulder, blinking sleepily as he watched. Wesley's words made complete sense. Robert wasn't simply fulfilling an obligation. He genuinely enjoyed being there with the children, answering their questions, and taking part in their everyday world. Porch. As the last guests headed out and we started cleaning up, Robert caught me watching him. "You look deep in thought," he said with a smile. "I was just thinking about how remarkable everything is," I replied honestly. "All the changes that brought us here." Later that evening, after Wesley took the children home, Robert and I sat on the couch sharing a slice of leftover birthday cake. Porch. He seemed slightly more reserved than usual, which lined up with what Wesley had shared about his upcoming plans. "Rena," he said, setting his plate down and turning toward me, "do you ever think about the future? About what you want the next chapter of your life to look like?" I smiled, knowing where the conversation was heading, but letting him take the lead. "Porch. I think about it a lot more these days," I said. "For a long time, I was just focused on getting through one day at a time. But now I can actually see a clear, happy future." "And what does that look like to you?" I thought about it carefully. "It looks like family dinners where everyone feels welcome. It looks like grandchildren who run toward me instead of pulling away. Porch. It looks like having someone to share good news with, and someone to lean on when things get tough." Robert took both of my hands, his expression thoughtful and sincere. "Does it look like waking up every day next to someone who respects and values you for exactly who you are?" "Yes," I said quietly. "That's exactly what it looks like." Porch. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware of the milestone approaching, yet comfortable taking our time. "Robert," I said after a pause, "are you entirely sure about this?" "I'm 63 years old. I come with a complicated family history, a very modest pension, and only so much energy to chase after young kids." Porch. Robert let out a soft laugh and brought my hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. "Rena, on the most difficult night of your life, you gave your last $5 to a stranger at a transit stop. If that doesn't show the kind of character I want to spend the rest of my days with, I don't know what does. Even if I can be set in my ways?" Porch. "Because you have the wisdom of someone who knows what truly matters. Even if I worry too much about the little things, especially because you have one of the most generous hearts I've ever known." I rested my head against his shoulder, listening to his steady, reassuring presence. "I love you, Robert Hayes. I love you too, Rena, more than I ever thought possible." Porch. The next evening, Robert brought me back to the quiet roadside diner where we had our first real conversation 6 months ago on Christmas Eve. He told me he wanted to bring things full circle, returning to the place where the truth had first come to light, to ask me to build a future together. Porch. When he got down on one knee right beside our usual booth and pulled out the ring Wesley had shown me the day before, I didn't even wait for him to finish his carefully prepared speech. I simply said yes. "Are you sure?" he asked with a laugh, sliding the classic diamond onto my ring finger. I actually had a whole persuasive argument ready to go. Porch. "I have never been more sure of anything," I said, pulling him up into a warm hug. Around us, the other diner patrons looking up from their late-night meals broke into spontaneous applause. "I've been sure since that snowy night you drove back to the bus stop to find me." 3 months later, we held our wedding in the backyard of Wesley's home. Porch. It was an intimate gathering, surrounded by the family and close friends who mattered most. Emma served as my flower girl, while little James, looking adorable in a miniature suit, proudly stood beside Robert as his best man. Porch. And Wesley, my son, just 3 weeks after the judge finalized the adoption paperwork securing our family under the law, walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes and placed my hand in Robert's. Sarah never tried to disrupt the wedding. There were no unwanted messages, no legal maneuvers, and no attempts to interfere. Porch. She had completely stepped out of our lives, leaving behind a clear reminder that when a family stands together on truth and integrity, they cannot be easily broken. As Robert and I exchanged vows in front of the people we loved most, my thoughts drifted back to that freezing Christmas Eve blizzard. Porch. I remembered sitting alone on that metal bench, convinced that my life had nothing left to offer, except loneliness and estrangement. I remembered the choice I made to reach out and help a stranded stranger, even when I had almost nothing left to give. Orch. That small act of decency set off a chain of events that not only brought my family back together, but also brought a deep and genuine love into my life that I never could have anticipated. Sometimes, the smallest choices create the most profound turning points. Orch. Sometimes, when you choose to do the right thing for someone else, even with just $5 in your pocket, life has a way of opening up paths you never could have imagined. And sometimes, when you think you're 63 and assume the best chapters of your life are behind you, a brief encounter at a bus stop might just be the very beginning of a brand new story. Orch. Now, I'd love to hear from all of you listening. If you were in my shoes that night, what would you have done? Have you ever experienced a sudden turn of events that completely restored your faith in family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to check out the other 2 stories linked on the screen right now. They are just as full of unexpected twists. Orch. Thank you so much for watching.